right. Hi, students. This is our notes from class today, so I thought I would throw these up here. They're also on my website on whitakerg6.weebly.com, and it's under the notebook practice pages section, and I have them on there uploaded through the page number. So if you're missing one of the page numbers from today, or you need a little bit more information that we didn't get to today in class because we did math club, then you can look through those uploads. But also I'll show them here as well. This was the first activity that we did in class, and we talked about ratios and how the ratios can be set up as part to part or part to total, or they might say part to whole. So if you look at like number 1 here, the part to part ratio right here that had to do with the paint colors, where there were 2 blue and 5 yellow. So the first part would be 2 to 5, 2 blue, 5 yellow, or you could also have done 5 yellow to 2 blue. You can write them with the word to separating. You can write them
6 toes to the office for checkout, please.
You can write them with a colon separating your two parts, or you can also write it as a fraction. I could write it as 2 over 5, or I could write it as 5 over 2. And then they also can show it as, or ask it as a ratio of a part to a whole. Now, generally, they don't give you the whole. You have to figure it out by adding your two parts together. So we have 2 blue to a total of 7. I got that by adding 2 plus 5. You can represent it with the 2 in between. You can represent it with the colon in between, or you can write it as a fraction, like so. And then same thing with below. You have 5 to 7, or 5 colon 7, or 5 over 7. What is the difference between the part to parts? You can't really see this, but they have the same numbers, but they are, it's cut off, but they are just flipped. So we have 2 and 2 and 5 and 5, but the numbers are just reversed. Now, what is the difference between the part to wholes is they're the same value for the wholes. You notice that they're both 7, but the parts switched out right here. There was 2, and now there is 5. Second page from our notes, we did some class ratios, which we did sneakers and others, but most of the kids had sneakers, so we kind of did it as shoes that tied and shoes that did not tie. So this was I think my ratios for my 4th period. We showed it as a fraction form also. We could have showed it with a decimal. It would look like this. Not decimal, I'm sorry, colon. And so, anyway, those are what we did in class with our ratio hunt in our class. Then we did girls to boys. This was actually done in my, I think, 2nd period. We did 11 girls to 12 boys. Again, those are our part to part. I did it with a colon. I did it as a fraction form, and then I did it with the word to separating the numbers. So we did girls to boys to girls, and then girls to total, and then boys to total. This was one that we got to, I think, in a few periods where we talked about the different scenarios. So in homeroom 6A, the scenario was there were votes for tigers outnumbered the votes for lions by a ratio of 240 to 160. That was actually a ratio with a part to part, 6A. 6B, this homeroom, said there were 80 more votes of tigers and lions. There was no ratio being done right here because we do not know the number for tigers or lions. We just know that there's 80 more. Homeroom 7A, it had the votes of tigers outnumbered the votes for lions with a ratio of 3 to 2. And so that was again, it was a part to part, and it was a ratio. And then homeroom 7B said 3 out of 5 were tigers. So that was a part to whole because we know 2 must be lions then, which would be the other part. Anyway, so that was part of the practice pages. The other one, this is prep work answers. That was your homework for tonight. Oh, and I think that's it. Let me see if I can make some pictures real quick of the other pages that we had here was, hold on a second. I think I could snap pictures of this real quick. Almost done. Okay. Hopefully, like when I come back, we'll be there still. So here we go. So this is another one of your practice pages. Again, they talk about how you can represent with a colon. You can do it with a fraction form. So here's some practicing where it says part to whole. It says 3 out of 4 votes were tigers. So you would do, sorry, 3 out of 5. So we did it with the colon, and then we did it in the fraction form. And then we have 2 out of 5 were lions. So now we have we know it has to be 2 because 5, which was the total, take away 3 gives me that 2 that has to be the lions. So 2 to 5 with colons, and then 2 to 5 in fraction form. Then we have a part to part. The phone is ringing. I'm going to let it go. But we have 3 to 2 and with colon, and then 3 to 2 with fractions. I think the bottom part's cut off, but you can kind of see it there. Then we have 2 to 3, and then again in the fraction form, 2 to 3. The next page, which was this, some more practicing where you can practice putting in the numbers and writing with the colon and in fraction form. So we did some part to whole and then part to part, so you can fill in your answers for this if you'd like. And you might want to pause the video to hold it. I'm going to go to the next page, which would look like this. This is just showing that there's special types of ratios where we do percentages, because a percent is out of 100. So we might say what would be the percent, meaning 35 out of 100. So that would be 35%. And you can write it with the out of, which is kind of like in the ratio format, in a fraction form or as a decimal, or you can write it with a percent like they did here. And then the last page, which was this, they had you practicing a little bit. Whoops, let me go back. Here we go. So then we can practice. We have 45 out of 100, which would be 45%, which would actually also be decimal 45. B would be 11 out of 100, which is 11%, which would be decimal 11. 70% or 70 over 100 would be decimal 70. Now, 2% as a decimal is a little tricky. It's decimal 02. A lot of kids think it's 20. This would be decimal 50, and this would be just 1.00 or just one whole. Whoops, there you go. All right, now starting with our homework from last night, let's talk a little bit about that, or tonight, sorry. Tonight's homework would look like this, and you did not have to do the write, we had to do the practice. Now, if it was me, I would list out all my different types of movies before I started doing my ratios. So I would say, okay, what are the different types of movies? We have sports they're looking for, so I would write sports. Then they're looking for war movies. I would write down war. Oh, I see comedies. I'd write down comedies. And then I see where they say total. I'd write down total. How many sports movies do we have? I have to go back into my reading, and I see it says 5. So I'm going to write down 5. Then it says 3 war movies. And it says 2 comedies. Now, what would be my total? How would I find my total? That would be by adding up all your different types of movies, which would be 5 plus 3 plus 2, which gives you a total of 10. Now I can fill in, and they asked me to write the ratio in colon form and in fraction form. So you have to do both of those forms. So for sports, to war, you have to keep it in that order if that's what you're asking. So you have to do 5 colon 3, and as a fraction, it will be 5 over 3. If you mix up those numbers, it will be incorrect. It has to be in that order. So I'm going to let you do the rest of it here. Very simple. You do not have to do the stretch. Now the review. The review is this. Write a right rectangular prism is shown. Determine the volume. So when I see that volume, how many dimensions should I be multiplying together? 3. Some of you are still having problems with this, I noticed from your test. So up here, I'd write length times width times height, and then you would plug in your numbers, and then you'd multiply across. B says determine the surface area. What does area mean? Area means you're only multiplying 2 dimensions together at one time. So you would find the area of just this surface, and you know that that's the front. So if there's a front, there's a back that matches. So you would say times 2. And then you would do the right side, and you would find the length and the width, or in this case, it would be the width and the height. So it would be the Winter Haven, and you would double it because it has a left side over here. And then you would do the top dimensions, which would be I believe that would probably be the length. That might actually be the width and the length. So that would be the Lake Wales, and you would do that, and then you would double it because it has a bottom. So the formula that we like to use, it's not given on your reference sheet, but we kind of like to memorize it, especially when we see that shoebox, which would be 2 Lake Wales plus 2 Winter Haven plus 2 Highlanders. Again, you would have to classify one of your dimensions as your length, one of your dimensions as your width, and one as your height. And then you would just plug in your numbers that go with each letter and solve. Number 2, it says estimate each sum or difference to the nearest whole and then calculate. Let's not estimate. I just want you to calculate. I want you to do A and B by not estimating. 3 you should know how to do, and 3A and 3B. But remember, you have to do something with that mixed number before you start multiplying. I hope you have a good night tonight. I hope this review helped. I hope the practice pages talking about it helps. And I'm looking forward to seeing you guys tomorrow in your, I believe, superheroes costumes. And have a good night.